The howl of a coyote pierced the moonlit desert as Wilhelmina Vaughn clutched her small leather satchel and darted between the shadows of San Jose's buildings. New Mexico Territory, 1876, a place and time where a woman's fate was often decided by men with money and power. Tonight, she was refusing that fate. The cool night air bit at her cheeks as she paused behind the general store, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Her father's arrangement with Theodore Harrington, a man 30 years her senior with a reputation for cruelty, was to be finalized tomorrow. The wedding would follow in 3 days' time. Wilhelmina, known as Willa to the few who truly knew her, had other plans. She had traded her fine silk dress for sturdy cotton, packed only essentials, and emptied the small savings she had secretly accumulated over years of selling her needlework. It wasn't much, but it would have to be enough to get her far away from San Jose. The sound of approaching horses made her blood run cold. Her father's men, already searching for her. They knew she would flee. They had been watching her closely since the arrangement was announced 2 weeks prior. Willa pressed herself against the weathered wood of the building, willing the shadows to swallow her whole. The riders passed, their lanterns swinging golden arcs through the darkness. When their light faded, she darted toward the livery stable. Her plan was to steal a horse, another sin to add to her growing list, and ride east until she reached Santa Fe, where she might find work as a seamstress or teacher. As she approached the stable, a match struck in the darkness, illuminating the face of a man leaning against the doorframe. Willa froze, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Evening, miss," the man said, his voice low and even as he lit a cigarette. "Bit late for a lady to be out alone." Willa took a step backward, ready to bolt, but the man made no move toward her. In the dim glow of his cigarette, she could see he wore a worn leather vest over a simple shirt, dusty trousers, and boots that had seen many miles. A cowboy's hat cast most of his face in shadow, but she could make out a strong jawline and eyes that watched her carefully. "I am not alone," she lied, her voice steadier than she felt. "My companion is just around the corner." The man took a long drag of his cigarette before responding. "Your companion must not care much for your safety, letting you wander toward a stable at midnight with Vaughn's men combing the streets." Willa's breath caught. "You know who I am." "Miss Wilhelmina Vaughn," he said, pushing himself away from the doorframe. "Daughter of the territory's wealthiest cattle baron, intended bride of Theodore Harrington, and currently fleeing what I suspect is an unwanted marriage." She reached for the small knife tucked in her boot, the only protection she had brought. The man raised his hands, showing he meant no harm. "My name is Matthew McCreedy. I work your father's northern pastures most seasons. We've never met, but I've heard plenty about the daughter who reads books and questions everything." "What do you want, Mr. McCreedy?" Willa demanded, still gripping her knife. "Nothing from you," he replied. "But I reckon you need something from me. A horse, perhaps? A head start before your father's men catch up." Willa narrowed her eyes. "Why would you help me?" Matthew dropped his cigarette and crushed it under his boot. "Because I've seen what becomes of women forced into marriages they don't want. My sister suffered such a fate." He paused, looking toward the street. "And I've worked for your father long enough to know Theodore Harrington is not a man I'd wish on any woman." The sincerity in his voice gave Willa pause. She had expected to face her journey alone, had prepared for it. But the reality of a woman traveling unaccompanied through the territory was dangerous at best, fatal at worst. "I plan to head east," she said cautiously. Matthew shook his head. "They'll expect that. Your father's got men watching the eastern trails already. North is your better option." Before Willa could respond, the sound of approaching horses returned, closer this time. Matthew quickly moved to her side, guiding her into the shadows of the stable. "You trust me," he whispered. "I don't even know you," she replied honestly. A wry smile touched his lips. "Fair enough. But right now, I'm offering you protection and you don't have time to find a better option." The riders were nearly upon them. Willa could hear the creak of saddle leather and the jingling of spurs. "Yes," she whispered, decision made. "I trust you enough." Matthew nodded, then moved swiftly into the stable. He returned moments later leading 2 horses already saddled. "I was preparing to head out myself," he explained, helping her mount a dapple gray mare. "Change of plans, that's all." As they rode out the back of the stable and into the desert night, Willa couldn't help but wonder if she had made a terrible mistake. Yet watching San Jose shrink behind them, she felt something unexpected, a flutter of hope. They rode hard for several hours, the landscape changing from desert flatlands to rocky foothills. Matthew set a pace that was challenging but not punishing for the horses, and he seemed to know the terrain well, avoiding the main trails and finding passages through the rocks that Willa would never have spotted. When they finally stopped to rest the horses near a small spring, Willa's legs were trembling with exhaustion. She had ridden all her life, but never so far so urgently. "We've got about an hour before dawn," Matthew said, helping her down from the saddle. "We should rest a bit. There's a place up ahead where we can hide out during the day." "Where exactly are you taking me?" Willa asked, massaging feeling back into her thighs. Matthew unsaddled the horses and led them to drink. "I know a place in the mountains, an old line shack on land your father doesn't own. We can stay there while we figure out your next move." "My next move is to get as far from New Mexico territory as possible," Willa said firmly. He nodded. "That's a fine goal, but it needs planning. Your father won't give up easily. His pride won't allow it." Willa knew he was right. Jonathan Vaughn had built his empire through sheer determination and ruthlessness. His only daughter defying him so publicly would be an insult he couldn't ignore. "Why are you doing this?" she asked again, watching Matthew as he filled their canteens from the spring. He was silent for a long moment. "I told you about my sister," he finally said. "What I didn't say was that she died by her husband's hand 3 years into that marriage. No one did anything to stop it, not the law, not her family, not me." He secured the canteen and turned to face her. "I was too young then, too far away, but I'm here now." The raw pain in his voice silenced any further questions. As they mounted up and continued their journey, Willa realized she had allied herself with a man haunted by his own past. Whether that made him more trustworthy or more dangerous remained to be seen. The line shack appeared as the first rays of dawn painted the eastern sky. It was a small, sturdy structure tucked against the side of a hill, nearly invisible unless you knew where to look. A creek bubbled nearby and pine trees provided shade and coverage. Inside was sparse but clean: a small iron stove, a table with 2 chairs, a narrow bed against one wall, and shelves stocked with basic supplies. "I use this place during hunting season," Matthew explained, lighting the stove. "No one comes up this way much." Willa stood awkwardly in the center of the room, suddenly aware of the impropriety of their situation. She was alone in a remote cabin with a man she barely knew. If her reputation wasn't already ruined by running away, this would certainly destroy it. Matthew seemed to read her thoughts. "You take the bed," he said. "I'll sleep outside with the horses. We're safe here, but I'll keep watch just in case." Willa nodded, grateful for his understanding. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything." He tipped his hat slightly. "Get some rest, Miss Vaughn. We've got a long journey ahead." Over the next few days, they fell into an unexpected rhythm. They traveled by night and rested during daylight hours, always staying off the main trails. Matthew taught Willa how to cover their tracks, how to move silently through the wilderness, and how to read the signs of those who might be following. He was a patient teacher, never condescending despite her city upbringing. In turn, Willa surprised him with her resilience and quick learning. She never complained about the hard pace, or the simple food, or the constant vigilance their situation required. On the fourth night, as they sat by a small, carefully banked fire, Willa finally asked the question that had been growing in her mind. "What about your life, Mr. McCreedy? You've left it behind to help me. Won't you be missed?" Matthew stared into the flames. "Not particularly," he answered. "I've been drifting for years. Pick up work where I can find it, move on when the season changes or the job ends. No one to miss me, no one expecting me anywhere specific." "That sounds lonely," Willa observed. He glanced up at her, a hint of surprise in his eyes. "Never thought of it that way, just seemed like freedom to me." "Freedom," Willa repeated, testing the word. "That's what I want too, the freedom to choose my own path." "And what would that path be if you could choose it?" Willa hugged her knees to her chest, considering. "I'd like to teach, I think. I've always loved books and learning, or perhaps open a small shop, fabrics and notions. I'm skilled with a needle." She paused. "It sounds simple compared to running away across the territory." "Simple isn't bad," Matthew said. "Simple can be good if it's what you want." They lapsed into comfortable silence, the fire crackling between them. Willa studied him in the flickering light. Matthew McCreedy was not what she had expected when she'd embarked on this desperate escape. He was quiet but not silent, strong but not intimidating. His face, weathered by sun and wind, carried a gentleness that contrasted with his capable hands and vigilant eyes. "We should reach Durango in about a week," he said eventually. "You could start fresh there. It's far enough from your father's influence but still civilized enough for a woman alone." "Is that where we're headed? Colorado?" he nodded. "Unless you have another destination in mind." Willa didn't. She had fled with only the vague notion of escape, not a clear destination. "Durango sounds fine," she agreed. "And you? Will you continue drifting after you deliver me safely?" Matthew added a small branch to the fire, watching the sparks rise. "Probably. It's what I know." Something about his answer left Willa feeling strangely hollow, though she couldn't understand why. After all, their arrangement was temporary, a chance meeting, a shared journey, nothing more. Yet as they doused the fire and prepared to ride again, she couldn't help wondering what it might be like to have Matthew McCreedy as more than just a temporary protector. The next morning brought trouble. They had just settled into their day camp, a sheltered hollow beneath an overhang of rock, when Matthew returned from scouting with tension evident in every line of his body. "Riders," he said tersely. "6 of them, following our trail." Willa's stomach clenched. "My father's men." "3 of them for certain. I recognized Mills and the Dawson brothers. The others might be hired guns." He began quickly gathering their belongings. "We need to move. Now." "But the horses, no time to rest them properly. We'll have to push on and hope we can find a place to lose our pursuers." They rode hard through terrain that grew increasingly rugged. Matthew led them up narrow game trails that switched back and forth across steep slopes, through stands of pine so dense the branches whipped at their clothing, and across shallow streams where the rocky bottoms wouldn't hold their tracks. By midday, Willa was swaying in the saddle, exhaustion making her dizzy. Matthew noticed immediately, guiding his horse alongside hers and reaching out to steady her. "Just a bit further," he encouraged. "There's a place ahead where we can rest safely." The place turned out to be an old mining tunnel, long abandoned and partially collapsed at the entrance. It was invisible from more than a few yards away, concealed by a tangle of shrubs and fallen rock. Inside, the air was cool and damp. Matthew unsaddled the horses and rubbed them down while Willa collapsed against the tunnel wall, her legs too wobbly to support her. "Will they find us?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Matthew crouched beside her, offering his canteen. "Not if I've done my job right," he replied. "We crossed our trail several times back there, left false signs heading east. Should buy us some time." Willa took a long drink, then handed the canteen back. Their fingers brushed in the exchange, and despite her exhaustion, she felt a small thrill at the contact. "I'm sorry," she said suddenly. Matthew looked at her quizzically. "For what?" "For dragging you into this, for putting your life in danger." She gestured vaguely at their surroundings. "You could be working somewhere safe, not hiding in a cave from armed men." A rare smile crossed Matthew's face, transforming his features. "Miss Vaughn, I haven't felt this alive in years. Dangerous work with purpose is better than safe work without meaning." His words warmed something inside her. No one had ever spoken to her like that, like her freedom was worth fighting for, worth risking everything. "Willa," she said softly. "Please call me Willa," he nodded, his smile gentling. "Willa then, and I'm Matt to my friends. Are we friends, Mr. McCreedy?" His eyes, blue as a summer sky, held hers. "I'd like to think so." The tunnel protected them through the remainder of the day and the night that followed. They spoke little, conserving their energy and water, but the silence between them had charged now, with something neither was ready to name. When they ventured out the next morning, the landscape had transformed. A storm had passed through overnight, leaving muddy terrain that would make tracking difficult. Matt looked up at the clearing skies with satisfaction. "Weather's on our side," he noted. "If we can make it through Bear Canyon today, we'll be harder to follow." Bear Canyon proved to be a narrow passage with steep walls rising hundreds of feet on either side. The trail was treacherous in places, forcing them to dismount and lead the horses carefully over loose shale and around massive boulders. Midway through, disaster struck. Willa's mare stumbled on a section of unstable ground, losing her footing and sliding several yards down a scree slope. The horse recovered, but Willa could immediately see she was favoring her right foreleg. Matt dismounted quickly and examined the injury, his expression grave. "She strained the tendon," he said. "She can walk, but she can't carry you, not on this terrain." Willa's heart sank. "What do? We keep moving," he decided. "Both of us on my horse leading yours. It'll slow us down, but we don't have much choice." Sharing a saddle meant an intimacy neither had anticipated. Willa sat in front, Matt's arms around her to hold the reins, his chest warm against her back. Each hoofbeat seemed to echo the rapid beating of her heart. They emerged from Bear Canyon as the sun was setting, finding themselves at the edge of a high plateau overlooking a vast valley. In the distance, they could see the silver ribbon of a river winding through the landscape. "The San Juan," Matt said, nodding toward the river. "Another 3 days' ride and we'll reach Durango." 3 days. The thought brought Willa less comfort than it should have. 3 days until safety, yes, but also 3 days until their journey together would end. They made camp in a copse of aspen trees, the white trunks ghostly in the gathering darkness. Without discussing it, they set up a single bedroll near the small fire. The night was turning cold, and conservation of warmth was a practical necessity. As they sat close together, sharing a meal of jerky and hard biscuits, Matt suddenly stiffened, his hand moving to the revolver at his hip. "What is it?" Willa whispered, alarmed. He shook his head slightly, signaling for silence. Then she heard it too, the distant sound of voices carrying on the night air. Matt doused the fire immediately, plunging them into darkness. "They're still following," he murmured, his mouth close to her ear. "We need to move. Now." They gathered their belongings with practiced efficiency, loaded the horses, and set off into the moonless night. Without light, the going was treacherous, but Matt seemed to navigate by some inner compass, leading them unerringly through the darkness. After an hour of silent travel, they descended into a shallow ravine where a small stream provided cover for their sounds. Here, Matt finally called a halt. "We should be safe for now," he said, helping Willa dismount. "They won't try to track us in the dark." Exhaustion overwhelmed her as soon as her feet touched the ground. She swayed, and Matt caught her arms, steadying her. "I've got you," he said softly, in the darkness, with only his voice and the solid strength of his hands to anchor her. Willa felt something shift inside her. This was more than gratitude, more than the bond of shared danger. Standing there, trembling with fatigue and fear and something else entirely, she realized she was falling in love with this quiet, steadfast cowboy. The realization should have frightened her. Instead, it filled her with a strange calm, as if some piece of her life's puzzle had finally clicked into place. "Matt," she whispered, reaching up to touch his face in the darkness. Her fingers found the rough texture of his stubbled jaw. He went very still beneath her touch. "Willa," he responded, her name a question and an answer all at once. She rose on her tiptoes and found his lips with hers, a kiss born of impulse and longing and the peculiar courage that comes with facing death. For a heartbeat, he remained frozen, and then his arms encircled her, drawing her against him as he returned her kiss with unexpected tenderness. When they finally parted, both breathing rapidly, Matt rested his forehead against hers. "This is dangerous," he murmured. "Everything about this journey is dangerous," she replied. "This is the only part that feels right." He made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sigh. "You deserve better than a drifting cowboy with nothing to his name." "I deserve to choose for myself," she countered. "Isn't that what this is all about?" Before he could answer, the crack of a rifle shot shattered the night. Matt reacted instantly, pulling Willa to the ground and covering her body with his own as another shot whistled overhead. "They found us," he said grimly, drawing his revolver. "Stay down." Heart pounding, Willa pressed herself against the earth as Matt returned fire. The exchange was brief, but terrifying muzzle flashes in the darkness, the acrid smell of gunpowder, shouts and curses from their pursuers. Then silence fell again, broken only by the frightened nickering of their horses. "I think I winged one of them," Matt said, reloading his weapon. "But there are too many and they've got us pinned down. We need to split up." "No," Willa protested immediately. "I won't leave you. You have to," he insisted. "Take my horse, he's faster, and your mare's still injured. Head northwest along the stream. There's a trading post about 15 miles on. A man named Greeley runs it. Tell him Matt McCreedy sent you. He'll help you get to Durango." "And what about you?" she demanded, clutching his arm. In the faint starlight, she could just make out the grim set of his jaw. "I'll lead them away, then circle back when it's safe." "That's suicide. It's strategy," he corrected. "Trust me, Willa, I know these hills better than they do." Another shot rang out, closer this time. They had no more time to argue. Matt pressed something into her hand, his spare revolver. "6 shots," he said. "Use them if you have to, but run first if you can." Then he was kissing her again, fierce and desperate, before pushing her toward his horse. "Go," he urged. "Now." Tears streaming down her face, Willa mounted the horse. "Promise you'll find me," she demanded. "I promise," Matt said, and she could hear the smile in his voice even in the darkness. A McCreedy always keeps his word. With that, he slapped the horse's rump, and Willa was galloping away along the stream bed, the sound of gunfire erupting behind her. She rode through the night, pushing the horse as hard as she dared while still following the winding course of the stream. The weight of Matt's revolver in her pocket was both comfort and burden protection, and reminder of the man who had given it to her. By dawn, she was disoriented and exhausted, no longer certain she was heading in the right direction. The stream had split several times, and she could only hope she had chosen the correct forks. When the trading post finally came into view around midday, it was all Willa could do to stay in the saddle. The building was little more than a large cabin with a corral attached, but smoke rose from the chimney, signaling occupation. An old man with a silver beard emerged as she approached, a shotgun held casually in the crook of his arm. "That's close enough," he called when she was still 20 yards out. Willa reined in the horse, swaying with fatigue. "Are you Greeley?" she managed to ask. The man's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "Who's asking?" "Matt McCreedy sent me," she said, her voice breaking on his name. "He said you would help." At the mention of Matt's name, the old man's demeanor changed instantly. He lowered the shotgun and hurried toward her. "McCreedy's girl. Lord Almighty, you look half dead. Come inside, quick now." Greeley turned out to be gruff but kind. He fed her, gave her a place to rest, and listened gravely to her story of flight and pursuit. "That sounds like McCreedy," he said when she described how Matt had stayed behind to draw off their pursuers. "Too damn noble for his own good. Will he be all right?" Willa asked, fear clutching at her heart. Greeley scratched his beard thoughtfully. "If anyone can outfox a bunch of hired guns in these mountains, it's him. Boy grew up not 10 miles from here, knows every cave and deer trail in the territory." This was news to Willa. "He grew up here. But he told me he was a drifter, working my father's ranch." The old man chuckled. "Oh, he's been drifting these past few years, sure enough. Ever since his family lost their spread to the bank. But McCreedy's people settled this valley before New Mexico was even a territory." "Lost their spread." Willa echoed, trying to fit this new information into her understanding of Matt. Greeley nodded sadly. "Bad drought 3 years back. Bank foreclosed on a lot of small ranchers. McCreedy's folks took it hard, both passed within a year. Matt's been wandering ever since, picking up work where he can find it. Sends money to his sister's kids when he has it." Willa's mind was reeling. "His sister? He told me she died." "Oh, she did, poor thing, but she left behind 3 little ones. They're with their pa's family over in Colorado Springs now." The picture of Matt that was emerging was far more complex than the simple cowboy he had presented himself as. A man with deep roots in this land, carrying griefs and responsibilities she hadn't imagined. "I need to find him," she said suddenly, standing up. "He could be hurt," or Greeley gently pushed her back into her chair. "You need to rest," he corrected. "And trust McCreedy to find his way here when it's safe. Meanwhile, I'll send word to the sheriff in Durango. He's an honest man, won't side with your father just because he's got money." For 3 agonizing days, Willa waited at the trading post, alternating between hope and despair. Greeley kept her busy, putting her to work sorting inventory and mending clothing, tasks that occupied her hands but left her mind free to worry. On the morning of the 4th day, she was sweeping the porch when the sound of approaching hoofbeats made her freeze. Shading her eyes against the sun, she peered down the trail, her heart in her throat. A lone rider appeared, slouched in the saddle, his horse moving at a weary walk. Even at a distance, she recognized the set of his shoulders, the way he held himself. "Matt!" she cried, dropping the broom and racing toward him. He lifted his head at her voice, and even from yards away she could see his exhausted face break into a smile. He dismounted clumsily, and as she reached him, she saw why a makeshift bandage was wrapped around his left thigh, dark with dried blood. "You're hurt," she gasped, moving to support him. He leaned on her gratefully, his arm across her shoulders. "Just a graze," he assured her, though the lines of pain around his eyes told a different story. "Worth it to see you safe." "What happened?" she demanded, helping him toward the trading post where Greeley had appeared, alerted by her cry. "Led them on a merry chase," Matt said, grimacing as he put weight on his injured leg. "Lost most of them in the high country, but Mills was persistent. Had to convince him more permanently." There was something grim in his voice that made Willa glance up sharply. "Did you kill him?" Matt shook his head. "No, winged him, same as he did me. But I've got his horse and gun, and he's got a long walk back to civilization. Should buy us some time." Greeley helped get Matt inside and onto a cot, where Willa cleaned and properly bandaged his wound. It was indeed just a graze, but it had bled heavily, and infection was a constant danger in the wilderness. As she worked, Matt watched her face intently. "I was afraid I wouldn't find you," he admitted quietly. "Afraid you'd given up on me and gone on to Durango." Willa smoothed the last piece of bandage into place, then met his eyes. "I would have waited much longer," she told him. "As long as it took." Something vulnerable flickered across his face. "Why?" Instead of answering directly, she said, "Greeley told me about your family. About the ranch you lost and your sister's children." Matt's expression shuddered. "Greeley talks too much." "Why didn't you tell me?" He looked away. "Didn't seem relevant to getting you to safety." "It's relevant to me knowing who you are," she countered. "Relevant to understanding why you helped me, why you risked your life." Matt was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "I helped you because it was right, because no one should be forced into a life they don't want." He paused. "And maybe because when I saw you that night, looking so desperate and so brave, something in me recognized something in you." "What?" she whispered. His eyes, when they met hers, were clear and direct. "Someone who'd lost everything but hadn't given up. Someone who still believed they could build something new." Willa felt tears well in her eyes. She had indeed lost everything: her home, her family, her place in society. But sitting here beside this wounded cowboy, she didn't feel the loss as keenly as she once had. "We could build something new together," she said softly, taking his hand. Matt's fingers tightened around hers. "Willa, I have nothing to offer you. No land, no house, barely enough saved for a fresh start." "You offered me protection when I needed it most," she reminded him. "You offered me freedom. That's worth more than all my father's cattle and land combined." A week passed at the trading post while Matt's leg healed and they made plans. The sheriff from Durango rode out to see them, bringing news that Jonathan Vaughn had indeed put a substantial reward for information on his daughter's whereabouts, but also that Theodore Harrington had publicly withdrawn his suit following the unseemly scandal. "Your reputation's in tatters, Miss Vaughn," the sheriff said bluntly, "but you're not technically breaking any laws by refusing to marry. Your father can't legally force you back." The knowledge brought Willa a profound sense of relief. She was free, truly free, to choose her own path. And she chose Matt. On a crisp autumn morning, with Greeley and the sheriff as witnesses, they were married in the trading post's small sitting room. Willa wore a simple blue dress that Greeley's late wife had left behind, and Matt had somehow procured a clean shirt and shaved his trail beard for the occasion. The ceremony was brief, the celebration afterward modest, but as they stood together on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold, Willa felt richer than she ever had in her father's mansion. "What now, Mrs. McCreedy?" Matt asked, his arm around her waist. Willa leaned into his embrace, considering. "Durango first," she decided. "I can find work teaching or sewing while you heal completely. And then—" His voice held a note of uncertainty, as if he still couldn't quite believe she had chosen this life, chosen him. She turned to face him, placing her hands on his chest. "And then we find a place of our own. not necessarily a grand ranch, just somewhere we can build a life together." She hesitated, then added, "Perhaps somewhere your sister's children could visit sometimes." The look that crossed Matt's face, hope and love and wonder all mingled together, was worth every hardship she had endured. "I love you, Willa McCreedy," he said, his voice husky with emotion. "And I love you, Matthew McCreedy," she replied, rising on her toes to kiss him as the last light of day gilded the world around them in promise. Spring came to Colorado with a riot of wildflowers and new beginnings. Willa stood on the porch of their small homestead, watching as Matt mended a fence in the distance. The property wasn't large, just 40 acres with a sturdy cabin and barn, but it was theirs, purchased with the combined savings of their winter's work in Durango. Willa had found employment at the town school, where her education and gentle manner made her popular with students and parents alike. Matt had taken work at the livery stable while his leg healed, then with a freight company once he could ride comfortably again. Together, they had saved every penny, living simply in a rented room above the milliner's shop, planning and dreaming of the future they would build. Now that future was taking shape before her eyes. The cabin needed work, the land needed clearing, but with each passing day it felt more like home. She placed a hand on her still flat stomach, smiling at the secret she would share with Matt that evening. New life growing inside her, continuation of the love they had found on that desperate flight across the territory. Matt looked up, sensing her gaze, and waved. She waved back, her heart full. From arranged marriage to chosen love, from flight to homecoming, the journey had been long and dangerous, but every step had led her here, to this man and this life she had claimed for herself. As Matt walked toward the cabin, his stride strong and sure, Willa thought about the letter she had written to her father the week before. Not asking forgiveness, not offering apologies, but extending an olive branch. Informing him of her marriage, her new home, inviting him to visit if he could accept her choices. She didn't know if he would respond, didn't know if reconciliation was possible after all that had happened. But she had made the gesture from a place of strength, not weakness. Matt reached the porch, climbing the steps with a smile that still made her heart race. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. McCreedy." Willa reached for his hand, guiding it to rest against her abdomen. "I was thinking that our family is about to grow," she said softly. His eyes widened, then filled with a joy so pure it took her breath away. "Truly," she nodded, laughing as he swept her into his arms, spinning her around on the porch while sunshine poured down around them like a blessing. Later that night, as they lay together in their bed, Matt's hand protectively curved over her stomach, Willa reflected on the night she had fled San Jose. How terrified she had been, how alone, how certain that her life was ending rather than beginning. No regrets. Matt murmured sleepily beside her. Willa turned to face him, tracing the beloved contours of his face in the moonlight that streamed through their window. "None," she answered truthfully. "Every step of the path led me to you." She thought of the child growing inside her, who would be born free to choose their own destiny. Thought of the home they were building, founded on love rather than obligation. Thought of the future stretching before them, uncertain but full of possibility. "No regrets," she repeated, nestling closer to her husband as sleep began to claim her. "Only gratitude for the cowboy who offered his protection when I needed it most, and his heart when I least expected it." Matt's arms tightened around her as they drifted into sleep together, safe in the knowledge that what they had found in each other and in themselves was stronger than any arrangement, more valuable than any fortune, and more enduring than any empire built on power alone. In the years that followed, the McCreedy homestead flourished. Their son William was born that first winter, followed 2 years later by a daughter they named Sarah after Matt's sister. The children grew strong and free, as wild as the mountains that surrounded their home and as gentle as the parents who raised them with love and understanding. Willa's father eventually responded to her letter, his pride softened by time and perhaps by loneliness. The reconciliation was tentative at first, stilted visits, careful conversations, but as he watched his grandchildren grow, Jonathan Vaughn gradually came to appreciate the life his daughter had chosen, and the man who stood steadfastly beside her. Theodore Harrington, the husband Willa had fled, eventually married a banker's daughter from Santa Fe and became a territorial politician, his cruelty masked by public charm but whispered about behind closed doors. Whenever Willa heard news of him, she said a silent prayer of gratitude for her escape and for the cowboy who had made it possible. Matt and Willa expanded their homestead over time, adding acreage and cattle, building a life that honored both their pasts while creating something entirely new. On summer evenings, they would often sit together on the porch, watching their children play in the lengthening shadows, marveling at the journey that had brought them to this place of belonging. And on quiet nights when the children were asleep and the house was still, they would sometimes speak of that desperate flight across the territory, of moonlit rides and hidden caves, of danger faced and overcome, of a kiss in darkness that had changed everything. "I knew then," Matt would say, his fingers entwined with hers. "I knew you were the one I'd been waiting for without even knowing I was waiting." And Willa, looking at the life they had built from nothing but courage and love, would smile and answer, "Some journeys are worth every risk, especially the ones that lead you home."